Once again, thank you for joining us. William Silla is our sign language interpreter.
Now, as we have just mentioned, Yvonne Okora is in our studio tonight, and she is going to be talking to the EACC chairperson, Muma Matemu, and it's going to be a very interesting discussion. Let's just hear a bit of what they are going to be discussing tonight. Yvonne, over to you.
Thank you very much, Wilson and Nancy, and we are live with the chair of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Chair Muma Matemu. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us tonight. Let's just start by talking about the issues that have come up regarding corruption in the country lately with what's happening in the PSC. A lot of issues have come up to light. Anglo leasing, some achievements there for the Commission. Tell us, what are your thoughts on corruption in the country at the moment? Where can we gauge the fight is as of now?
Firstly, I think we need to separate perception, politics, and the fight against corruption. We have to look at where we have come from. Maybe we have come from a point where the country had sunk so low that people are skeptical, and it's easy for every Kenyan to call everybody else corrupt. That is something that we need to take out of Kenyans so that we can focus on the fight. And the other one is the question of setting certain things straight. For example, we have seen people accusing and counter-accusing and talking about who can remove who can deal with who. I think we need to get the basics straight. The other point that we need to deal with is the question of, therefore, what are we going to do if we are in that position? Education, to me, is something that is very important. The preventive strategy is very important, but we also have to focus on the youth that we are molding, so that we can make a break.
Right. I mean, we talk about, and you've talked about education with the youth, and we do talk about corruption within the government circles. We've lately seen it in private sector. But we also had some statistics that the average Kenyan pays 16 bribes a month just to get this going, showing you that it's entrenched, not just within government circles, but within people. The term "it's our turn to eat" literally does mean that for some people, and taking it as an opportunity. What will it take to root out corruption from everyone, including us as common wananchi?
What I think it will take is first and foremost focusing on our new dispensation. We have a commission, fortunately, which is entrenched in the Constitution to fight corruption. We will also need to tell Kenyans that much as we are using enforcement, it's important to again restate the place of prevention. Because of the history that we have had, Kenyans want to see blood. We have a problem also where people want to report Yvonne as corrupt. They want to be the judge, they want to be the investigator, and they want you behind bars.
Judge, jury, executioner.
Judge, jury, executioner. At one time, a journalist like you told me, you know what we should do? We should just grab all corrupt people and parade them in Uhuru Park and shoot them.
All right, so more about getting evidence, and we will get more to that, including the intrigues that are happening in the country at the moment in the fight against corruption. Stay with me, Mr. Chair. We will be back with more of that conversation. Indeed, do stay with us as well. The hashtag is Rogue Watchdogs. Back to you, Nancy and Wilson, for more news of the day.
Well, of course, looking forward to hearing more from Muma Matemu and that discussion with Yvonne Okora now. Let's begin here in Nairobi, where it emerged that today that two commissioners of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission have written to the President calling for the sacking of their chairperson, Muma Matemu.
Now, the two, Jane Onsongo and Irene Kano, accuse Matemu of incompetence and lack of vision.
The revelations came just hours after the CEO of the Commission, Halake Wako, reversed Matemu's decision to suspend the Deputy CEO, Michael Mubea.
KTN's Asha Mwilu begins our coverage of the latest intrigues from Integrity Center.
On Monday evening, EACC chairperson Muma Matemu fired the first shot, issuing this suspension letter to the Deputy CEO of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Michael Mubea. In the letter, Aveg Matemu claims that intelligence reaching EACC had raised strong integrity issues surrounding Mubea's work. Integrity challenges that Matemu writes would amount to gross misconduct and would have Mubea dismissed from EACC. A special interagency committee would have to be appointed to investigate the claims, Matemu continues. And with that, the man in charge of the Anti-Corruption Agency's Investigations, Prevention and Legal Services Directorates was shown the door, and curiously ordered to hand over all files in his in-tray to the chairperson. As headlines ran with the story of Mubea's untimely suspension, another bombshell was dropped from Integrity Center. In a rejoinder, EACC CEO Halake Wako punches the first hole into Matemu's letter. Halake says he's unaware of any intelligence reports concerning his deputy's work. He's surprised that the intelligence would bypass him as CEO and go straight to Matemu. Halake's letter also raises questions into the interagency committee that Matemu claims would probe Mubea's conduct. Who is to appoint the committee and from which agencies, he wonders. But where Halake's letter has Matemu in a chokehold is here. The CEO puts Matemu back in his place, reminding him that his role as chairperson is to simply give directions on such matters and that the issue of appointment and suspension should be left solely to the CEO. Driving the nail into the coffin, Halake directs Mubea to report back on duty. EACC's skeletons are coming out just as the anti-graft body is seemingly picking pace in charging suspects of major corruption scandals like the Anglo leasing. But it appears the Mubea cat and mouse chase is just the tip of the iceberg. Now, it's emerging that the two other commissioners of EACC, Irene Keino and Professor Jane Onsongo, had only 6 months ago written to the president seeking to have Muma Matemu removed as chairperson of EACC. The two commissioners sensationally claimed in their letter that as EACC investigated Anglo leasing contracts, Matemu was allegedly secretly engaging the suspected architects of the scam, like a Mr. Kamani.
Our work is to verify that, in fact, these petitions, the issues raised in the petition may be legitimate or not, and whether they actually form a proper basis for an allegation to be brought forward and for the process to move beyond just a petition.
In the letter's closing statement, Keino and Onsongo say that they are worried that the man at the helm of EACC has only one agenda, which is to make money and bring the institution down. The battle lines appear to be clearly drawn at Integrity Center, and with these new documents out in the public domain, Kenyans can only watch in spectacle as the country's main anti-corruption watchdog desperately cries for someone to watch it. Asha Mwilu, KTN, Nairobi.
Now, this controversy, of course, now forms the big basis of our big question tonight. And we are asking, do you trust the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission? Do you trust the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission?
What happens when the watchdog seems to need a watchdog? It is a rather big question, of course. Let us know what your thoughts on this are, and you can do that by tweeting us at KTN News KE, at Wilson_Mburu, and at Kachungira. You can also send an SMS to 22155. Of course, the EACC has a lot on its plate, including scandals like Anglo leasing. But if their own house is not in order, how will they undertake these Herculean tasks? Share your thoughts with us on our Big Q this evening. Now, the latest confusion at Integrity Center has rekindled memories of the intrigues that have dogged Kenya's war on corruption for nearly 20 years now. KTN's Rita Tinina now looks back at the numerous false starts and why the latest developments should be cause for concern.
This building remains famous for the great sound bites that have come from here.
We think none harm, do none harm, wish none harm. We only attack corruption, and if corruption has a residence in your person, we must deal with you because you accommodate corruption.
The director levied between the hammer of his friends and the anvil of his opponents.
But Kenya's war on graft has been dogged by intrigues right from the beginning. It started with this man, John Harun Mwau, who in December 1997 was appointed the first director of the then newly created Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority. But the ex-policeman would soon run into trouble when he sought to prosecute 4 top treasury and tax officials over an alleged fraud on non-collection of taxes relating to wheat and sugar imports. A tribunal was quickly put together to prosecute Mwau, and in November of 1998, he resigned, sending Kenya's anti-corruption war on a spiral. It turned out that Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority had been given powers to prosecute without an amendment to the Constitution that at the time confined such powers to the office of the Attorney General.
Banauriri, who gave you authority to write these things to me? Have you read the Prevention of Corruption Act? Have you read?
Justice Aaron Ringera, who as Solicitor General had been a witness at the Mwau Tribunal, was later appointed as the new director of CASA in March of 1999. But on December 22, 2000, the courts finally dealt CASA a death blow, declaring it unconstitutional. With pressure mounting on the KANU government from both the IMF and the World Bank, the government appointed an anti-corruption police unit headed by a former deputy director of CASA, Swale Slim, to take over all the 139 cases that were being investigated by the authority. But the unit's mandate remained unclear, and its independence was questioned by critics. A ray of hope came in 2003, when in the early days of the NAC administration, the Kenya Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act was passed, putting in place the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission, KACC. And once again, Aaron Ringera was given the job of reviving Kenya's faltering war on graft. Ringera would become famous for his Shakespeare quotes and promises of fire and brimstone for the corrupt. But he had to bow out on the 30th of September 2009 when Parliament refused to endorse his reappointment on claims that his fishing expeditions had come to naught.
And for those who perennially complain that cars only deals with the small fish, let me ask you to reflect on this.
He declared that the war on corruption would never succeed until the commission was given powers to prosecute, to seize assets and passports, and require public officials to declare wealth whenever it deemed fit. But the commission was in for more drama. Next on stage, Professor Patrick Loch Otieno Lumumba.
In the next 2 to 3 weeks, we expect that about between 5 and 10 high voltage files, 5 to 8 high voltage files.
PLO would hit the ground running, even joining street demonstrations on occasion. But his Waterloo would come in the middle of 2010 when he declared that he was training his guns on top officials and members of parliament.
Fight against corruption will be conducted without fear, favor or ill will, for the sake of this country and for the sake of this generation and generations yet to be born.
That would pave way for a fresh controversy over the appointment of Mumo Matemu as the chairperson of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. The latest intrigues bear the hallmarks of an all-too-familiar pattern. But with the talk of corruption in every major public institution, the big question now is whether Mumo Matemu's commission will still have the energy to lead the fight. Rita Tinina, KTN, Nairobi.
Let's go to Parliament now. The embattled Public Accounts Committee Chairman Ababu Namwamba is due to appear before a probe committee tomorrow. Ababu is expected to shed more light on the now famous recordings he is said to have made that implicate members of his committee in corruption. But before this probe fully gets underway, a group of legislators now claim that no parliamentary committee has the moral authority to investigate another committee. Homa Bay Member of Parliament Peter Kaluma, who is part of the dissenting group, is urging his colleagues, especially members of the Public Accounts Committee, to boycott the hearings.
Matters of corruption are issues of economic crimes. I don't know how somebody can dovetail them and put them within the context of privileges. There is no privilege corruption. There is nothing the House Privileges Committee is investigating around corruption. Corruption is an economic crime. Let us send it to Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission so that we have a body we can defer to when really we have doubts about the investigations. As matters stand, I wanted to request Honorable Pius Ababuna Mwamba and all members of his committee not to honor any summons to appear before House Privileges Committee on this matter. The committee, as it stands, should be chaired by the Speaker. The committee should have 10 members. In these 10 members, 6 are Jubilee members, 4 are from the Code Coalition.
Well, if you find these developments alarming, you're not the only one. The controversy in Parliament has also alarmed former MPs who sat in key watchdog committees. The former legislators say that the developments have lowered the stature of Parliament as a custodian of public welfare. KTN Sam Ogina now reports on the reflections of some of the men who served when watchdogs still held a place of pride.
He pioneered the first Public Investment Committee in 1992 in the advent of multi-party politics, a crucial watchdog committee to check the KANU regime. It is under their tenure that former Webuye MP Musikari Kombo pushed for the establishment of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Committee, an equivalent to the Public Accounts Committee.
At that time, one of George Angwenyi was a member of that committee. He was then an assistant minister. When we left Naivasha, before he reached the escarpment, he had been sacked from being an assistant minister because he had been participating in a meeting of rebels. But we were not rebels.
The new Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Committee would begin a probe into corruption scandals pre-multi-party era. The result was a bold and damning report that named and shamed powerful cabinet ministers in the KANU regime. Despite the report being tabled in Parliament, nothing came out of it as KANU marshaled its numbers to expunge the names from the report.
We decided that we shall be bold and we shall name to shame. And I think that's the first time in the history of this country that people were named.
Omingo Magara sat in the powerful Public Accounts Committee during the NAC regime. After the lead was lifted on the Anglo-leasing scam, he shepherded a probe and consequently tabled a report unmasking the unscrupulous deals and billions of sums lost.
There are two things you cannot do at the same time. You cannot chew and talk at the same time. If you are chewing for your own benefit, the Kenyans who have given you a voice to speak will be voiceless. In my committee, we chose to speak.
Despite pressure, government's opposition and manipulation doctoring the first Anglo-leasing report, the PAC then remained steadfast in its role to expose the rot within government in emptying public coffers.
They gave us a voice to speak. Those poor women who give you a vote can't speak English in Parliament. Please express yourself, not then robbing them again of the taxes to enrich yourself further, actually compromising the mandate you are given. So I think corruption is a crime that should be given a maximum sentence if possible.
There is general consensus that the gains made in emboldening Parliament in its watchdog role is fast being degraded.
People like the late Shikuku, wherever they are, sitting in the grave, people who really believed in the fight against corruption, seeing this, people like myself seeing this, yes, you will feel betrayed.
Those debts that we incur are not supposed to be incurred. And it's a pain to all of us in Kenya that today that public debt is soaring to about 2 trillion shillings.
The acrimony facing the Ababu Namwamba-led PAC has soiled the reputation of Parliament, with the former watchdog crusaders saying the National Assembly has terribly failed in its representation role. The Public Accounts Committee finds itself in a credibility crisis, caving into corruption pressure, essentially falling short on its former investigative committees that in the face of adversity still waded through the murky political waters to expose the rot in government undeterred. Sam Ogina, KTN, Nairobi.
Now, in a rejoinder following an interview in which Nairobi Governor Dr. Evans Kidero sought to exonerate himself from massive allegations of corruption at Mumias Sugar, audit firm KPMG has sought to put the record straight.
In a statement seen by KTN, KPMG says that it wrote to Dr. Kidero on the 11th of June 2014 to request an interview with him to accord him an opportunity to provide clarification on the transactions that occurred at the time that he was the managing director at MSC.
Dr. Kidero responded via a telephone conversation and objected to being invited for an interview. We subsequently received a letter from Dr. Kidero's lawyer, Mr. Tom Onyango, of Ochieng Onyango Kibete and Ohaga Advocates, dated 16th of June 2014.
In addition to objecting to being invited for the interview, this letter went on to state that, as a matter of fact, you know or ought to know that our client left the employment of Mumias Sugar Company in the year 2012, and he may shed little or no light on the transactions that you may be looking into.
Well, it is that time again when Yvonne Okwara will be sitting down with Muma Matemu, who is the chairperson of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. And this discussion, of course, is going to be revolving around the fact that there has been a bit of controversy at the corruption watchdog body.
That's right. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you very much, Nancy and Wilson. And we're still here with the chair of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. All right, let's get right into it and let's clear some of these matters that have come up today out of the way. Yesterday, you wrote a letter to Mubea, who's the Deputy CEO, Michael Mubea. You said there are integrity challenges that have resulted in ridicule to the Commission and negative media publicity, and then went on to suspend him. Kindly tell us what some of these issues or integrity challenges he's said to have been involved in.
I think it will be inappropriate for me to go into those matters before they are investigated. I have to be fair to the officer. He is my officer. He is an officer of the Commission. We need to be fair to him. Let me say that these are matters which relate to employment by ourselves as the appointing authority, and we will sort them out. It should not be something that we should blow out too much. They will be sorted out.
Okay, and yet it has blown up into that because the CEO has then come out to rescind your decision to suspend the Deputy CEO and has therefore asked him to go back to work. Would you care to comment on this?
Yeah, that's something that we will sort out. We will sort it out as early as tomorrow, maybe the day after. We will sort it out in line with the laws.
All right, but
the question of the role of the Commission vis-à-vis the role of CEO, who is also an employee of the Commission, is something that we are going to examine tomorrow. There is no vanity about this. My letter was not released by me to the press. It was released by somebody else, not me. I also saw the CEO's letter in the press before it reached me. So this is something that we are going to...
All right, Mr. Chair, you would agree that this then puts fear in Kenyans because what we are seeing similarly happening in the Parliamentary Accounts Committee is happening here. And a lot of people are starting to wonder if there's a lot of infighting amongst yourselves, then the process of fighting corruption has been hampered.
There's no infighting between the commissioners. The Commission, under Section 4 of the ESCC Act, is the chair and 2 commissioners. There is no infighting among the commissioners. Let me correct you about something that that has been said about a petition. The commissioners have since said that they found all those matters which were in the purported petition were based on manipulation and misguidance.
So is it your statement today that the commissioners have negated or rescinded what they said in September to the President?
The commissioners did not say anything to the President. As a matter of fact, they did not release any document to the President.
However, Manoa Esipisu has today confirmed receipt of this petition.
What Manoa says is that it reached. The question is who took it there. It was not the commissioners. Okay? So and they have said it in writing that it is not them. We'll be able to share that with them.
That they're not the ones who sent it. So why would they write it and then somebody else send it?
They said and they explained that there was an element of misunderstanding. And there was an element of manipulation. And they have since looked at those things and found that none of them can be verified.
Right.
Yeah, that's
they have written this. All right, let's just get into some of the challenges that they mention. They have expressed displeasure in the leadership of the chair. They have described you as lacking the desire to fight corruption and lack of vision, and have even gone on to say that he has declared in public that he joined the commission to make money and not fight corruption. Would you speak about some of these statements that were made by them?
As far as I know, all these things, without exception, were recanted by the commissioners.
But we have no proof of that recount today.
I think the letter was actually dispatched. I asked somebody to dispatch it today, because we saw this today.
So it was dispatched to
they themselves
who? To the president, to yourself?
No. First, they had written a letter to me in January saying that, look, these things, we are working together harmoniously, and these things were the basis of...
Okay, nevertheless, they raised some issues that continue to cast aspersions on the work of the commission. For example, they said, whilst investigating and releasing contracts, the chairperson is secretly engaged in meetings with architects of the scam. Mr. Kamani, have you ever met Mr. Kamani?
Never. I have never.
Why do you think they would say this?
To the contrary. Because they were relying on information which somebody purported to be correct.
All right, let's talk about that information you say they were relying on. Why would they not come to you first? Why would they then write to the president and then rescind this in the letter that you're saying in January?
I will explain. There's something I will explain to you. We needed, in September, to set out committees of the commission. Okay? We had shades of opinion about the way the commission's committees should be constituted. And there was clearly an agreement to disagree. That could have been cashed on by some people in order to deal with this. And I'm sure the commissioners will come out fairly clearly about this. Let us not start canvassing the petition before it becomes a petition. That is for me what I would ask.
However, this just points to the fact that there were some sharp differences, obviously. By the time you have 2 out of 3 commissioners sitting down and putting all of these complaints and challenges down and writing that to the president, obviously means there was friction. So the question we asked today is, what is that working relationship like? And is it focused on the fight against corruption or the fight against these allegations that are coming out today?
These allegations are history. First, let's begin that. And number 2, as you have seen, we have shown that we are since working together. That's the reason why we are now having some people to book. We have quite a number of people that we have brought to book, and we shall continue doing that. So that is as much as I would like, because this has been recanted, and they have clarified that position in writing by a document, again, signed by both of them. I would rather leave it at that, so that we don't start canvassing the same thing which has been recanted. That's part of the reason why I said I'll come today.
Yes, and we thank you for coming. But when we talk about the opinions and the judgment calls they made, saying you lack the desire to fight corruption, lack of vision, and that you have a divide and rule policy at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, how sure we have changed their opinions, and what, in your view, might have changed their opinions from September to January? This obviously points to a judgment call on their part.
To the contrary, we sat down with them in a commission meeting, and they came out to the fact that, look, we had a misunderstanding in terms of the way the committees should be organized and run, and we think the matters are now clear. That happens in many shades of leadership, and they have stated, which is the most important thing, that they and the chair are working harmoniously, and they are focused on the fight against corruption.
Yes, but these disagreements are not just with the commissioners. Right now, as we speak, this is what happened in September. You say that has been resolved in January, and we would perhaps hope that you can avail some of these letters that you're speaking about to us. However, today, you're disagreeing with your CEO over issues of the suspension of the deputy CEO. So it does look like there are these little fires that keep coming up. And again, we go back to that fight against corruption and the credibility in the eyes of the public. So can we talk about some of those issues? Because today it's a disagreement with the CEO. In September it was a disagreement with the commissioners. So you do have to admit that the public, and even from the feedback we're getting today, saying they do not trust the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
I think let me mention this. This new issue is something that tells you that in the fight against corruption, you have to be ready to get this flag. It must come your way.
Even from within?
Even from within. You must be ready.
So how do you work together when there's all of this flack even from within?
Well, you haven't seen anything before that. Now, I mean, from the Secretariat. So we sorted it out with the commissioners a long time ago, about 2 months ago now. Even this one with...
so what next
because
with this one?
The law speaks for itself. So we will sit down, we will look at the law, and we will be guided by the law. Yeah.
And speaking of the law, under Article 47 of the Constitution, this is the letter by the Secretary, Chief Executive Officer, says that you must confront Mr. Mube with the specifics of the allegations and accord him the opportunity to respond before you can take any action. He claims this has not happened.
Look, what we have said is that we will confront him with everything. We will give him all the time to answer the issues that have been raised. And we have said, in fairness to the Commission and to himself, there are times when you have to tell somebody, please step aside, because this has happened. And like I'm saying, because we asked him to step aside and he raised issues through the CEO, not through himself, that, look, there is a question of whether I'm getting fair administrative action. That is the next thing that we will resolve.
All right, and you, in his suspension, you talked about creating an interagency committee.
Yeah.
Is this in the works already? Because he's only been suspended for 30 days. Some questioning whether this should have been formed before his suspension. Where are these persons going to be drawn from, these members of the interagency committee?
Well, we are looking at the CID, for example, because we don't want a situation where it's only ourselves investigating it. We are looking at the CIJ, for example, the Commission on Administrative
Have you already started to look for these individuals?
Yeah.
When do we expect this committee to be constituted?
By Friday.
All right.
Yeah.
So by Friday, this commission should be there. Here's another curious thing he raises, and in effect, sort of alluding to the fact that this could be abuse of office. You directed the officer to hand over any files he has to you as opposed to the CEO. Why is that? Will you now be handling the functions that are taken up by the Deputy CEO?
No. If you look at Section 11, the commissioners have some specific mandate to deal with matters to do with delayed investigation, among other things. We started a file audit. The reason why we started with the file audit is because we needed to deal with delayed investigations. These complaints were coming up in Parliament. They were coming up in many fora. You would be told that, look, my file, I reported this in 2009. I reported in 2010. Nothing has happened. So how do you do that? You want to audit the file, so you are telling him, hand over the files so that we can discuss these files.
But you said any files that are in his possession.
Yeah, because the files we are talking about are investigation files, so that they can be fed into the file audit program.
Why was the CEO left out of the process? He claims he was.
After,
was he?
No, he was not. After we wrote to the CEO and told him, now, can you go ahead and implement this decision of the Commission, which we have communicated. So he was not left out.
All right. Yeah. Today we're talking about rogue watchdogs. Yeah. We're seeing fights within the Parliamentary Accounts Committee and fights within the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, two of the organizations that we need to fight corruption in the country. Yeah. With all of the political intrigues and twists and turns that we're seeing, what assurances do Kenyans have that there is anybody fighting corruption and not fighting each other?
Well, I think the assurance that we would give, and I say it again, the reason why I needed to come here on short notice after you asked me to give an interview is because we have all the intention and all the commitment. For example, the file audit is supposed to show openly what is the state of files. Have some files been moving faster than others, and why? The other day we prepared a report to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee showing the way files had moved, and we made commitments about certain dates in terms of files on key high-profile files. We want to make sure that indeed that every file is moving and no officer owns files. No officer claims proprietorship of files. For us to be able to draw a strategy in terms of, and that is our business as commissioners, to draw a comprehensive strategy, we must start from a point of information. What is the state of files? How long have officers been?
So that is the audit that is happening now towards the fight against corruption. We have to leave it at that for now. Thank you very much, Chair of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, Mumo Matemu, joining us and giving us the details on the fight against corruption in the country. Nancy and Wilson, it's back to you.
Well, the big question tonight, again, it's all about corruption, and we are asking you, do you trust the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission in regards to what is happening now at that anti-graft body? Do you trust the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission? Nancy, I don't know whether you have any responses just yet.
I certainly do. Of course, a number of insights from that interview. But this is an SMS from Victor Wasonga in Rongai, Nakuru. Thank you for writing in. And you say that I do not support the EACC. Corruption has not been dealt with decisively at all. Well, thank you for giving us your feedback. And this one from Owege in Kisumu, well, you say corruption fights back, and that's what is going on at Integrity Center.
Ambuli Victor here says EACC's credibility clearly falls below the ethical standards. Matemo is economical with the truth. Those are some of your views, and we'll continue sampling them as the bulletin continues. Remember, when you write an SMS, start with a yes or no so that we are able to sample that, to roll that rather, into a result at the end of this newscast.
That's right. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back here on KTN Prime. Don't go too far.
Welcome back. You're watching KTN Prime. Now, as academic giants across the country continue to savor their victory in last year's KCSE exams, students of a school in Msambweni, Kwale County are reeling from the shock of just how poorly their school performed in last year's examinations.
Now get this, out of the 102 students, the highest score was a C.
KTN's Francis Ontomwa now reports.
Lunch break at the Mwamzandi Mixed Secondary School, Kwale. Time for students to take a breather, end the class monotony, and take up another activity. These students have to move even faster to catch up with the afternoon lessons. They know too well that it's not business as usual. The school dropped from the mean score of 1.9 in 2013 to last year's 1.7.
Ndio, hatungesema ni vizuri na hatutasema tumesikia vizuri. Ile tumefanya ni kwamba ni matokeo yetu. Unajua, tusipokubali tutashinda tukijilaumu, lakini tukikubali na tuseme ni wapi tulikosea, nadhani hapo tutapata.
An air of disquiet continues to hang around here, becoming almost notable that all is not well. Out of the 102 candidates who sat their KCSE examinations, none attained the minimum university entry qualification, and leading the pack were 2 students who scored C-, one scored a D+, 62 D-, while 37 scored E's.
Watoto wa huku tunasema, ama hata nyinyi mnaweza mkasema, watu wa pwani tunawatarajia wao wanazungumza Kiswahili kizuri, lakini kile wanachokizungumza ni tofauti. Kuna tofauti kubwa kati ya kile kinachozungumzwa na kile kinachofundishwa. Kuna tofauti kubwa. Kwa hivyo naweza sema masomo yote yamefanywa vibaya.
20-year-old Omar Choyo was among the 2014 class. He managed a D-, a grade that now injures his dream of becoming a chemical engineer. He's here today to seek a second chance, ready to retake the examinations this year.
Kwa sasa, hiyo grade yenye nimepata na ile kozi yenye nilikuwa nataka kufanya, vile grade haiwezi kuniprosper, imenibidi sasa, ni lazima nirudi nyuma ili nianze kurepeat tena nipate hiyo grade. Na chenye kitanifanyisha nisifanye hivyo, hiyo ni kwa sababu ya finance. Finance kwangu iko chini sana.
The woes of Mwamzandi Secondary have been largely blamed on a general lack of proper infrastructure and rampant student absenteeism. Some students stay away from classroom, finding leisure at local joints and the beaches. The school also has a thin number of qualified teachers, just 5 TSC employed. Machafu Swale Machafu is a parent at Mwamzandi.
Ningeomba pia watu wajaribu kuangaliwa kama zile shule zingine ambazo zinaangaziwa, kama zile shule za kitaifa, iwe moja wapo kama Mwamzandi pekao ni shule moja kama kitaifa, ili pate facilities nyingine kama wale wengine wanapata facilities, kwa sababu sote ni wa Kenya.
The 2014 KCSE results may have stashed and condemned Momzandi Secondary School among the poorest performers in the country. The challenges are in bounty, but among stakeholders still burns a desire to turn the tables and make the school post better results this year. Francis Ontomwa, KTN, Kwale.
And residents of Boy Village in Omea Mwalo sublocation in Siaya County are mourning the death of one of their own who lost her life after a scuffle ensued between her and a neighbor over, get this, 1,500 shillings.
Really sad story. Victor Ogale with the rest of the details.
Residents of Boy Village in Siaya County woke up to sad news after 55-year-old Felista Rega was pronounced dead. Felista and 3 other women who are all officials of a self-help group known as Community Saving and Loaning Kosalo visited the home of Benta Akinyi who had borrowed 2,000 shillings in April 2014 and was to pay after 1 month. However, Benta never kept a promise, having only paid 500 shillings. The 4 Kosalo officials on arrival at Benta's home decided to take the law into their own hands and began taking Benta's belongings to recoup the 1,000 shillings loss. However, a scuffle ensued, drawing in Benta's husband.
It is the members themselves who have taken law into their hands. They are not following the rules that were put in place initially. So these are the cause of these ones here.
Wherever there is something like a debt, they can ask for assistance from the local chiefs or even the police, so that we prevent such incidents which unfortunately could not have happened.
According to one of the Kosalo officials who declined to be interviewed on camera, Benta overpowered the late Felista Achieng, pushed her to the ground. As she fell, Felista Achieng hit her head on a coffee table before losing consciousness.
Kabla sijapeleka watoto shule na pikipiki, ndio huyo mama mmoja wao ni familia yetu huko kwetu. Akakuja akaniambia ati mama yenu amepigwa huko kwa boma lingine huko, enda umuone vile anakaa. Nikamuuliza, vile mulienda kudai hiyo pesa, mulienda na serikali ama mulienda peke yenu? Akaniambia walienda tu kumuuliza ni siku gani atalipa hiyo pesa.
Benta Achieng was later taken to the nearby Aram police station for further questioning, while the body of the late Felista Rega was taken to Siaya Hospital mortuary. What began as a mere move to demand from a neighbor to pay her debt has now left the residents of Boy Village in Siaya County mourning after the demise of one of their own. Victor Ogale, KTN, in the county of Siaya.
You are watching KTN Prime, and just before we take a quick break, let's remind you of our big question tonight. We are asking you whether you trust the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
That's right. Keep your feedback coming, and you can do that by tweeting us. Remember, the scandal is Rogue Watchdogs, and you can send that tweet to @KTN News KE, @Kachingira, and @Wilson_Mburu, or send a message to 22155. There's an SMS here from Henry Rotino in Nairobi. He's not mincing his words at all. He says, no, if there's somebody I would really love to be sacked from EACC, it is Matemo. He is, to me, a big letdown to Kenyans. Chicken Gates and City Hall scams are some of the corruption scandals that he's not willing to do anything about, and he should go home.
Well, those are your views, and we'll continue sampling them as the bulletin continues. Right now, we take a very quick commercial break. We'll be back with the day's business.
Well, good evening and welcome to KTN Business. My name is Abi Agina. Let's catch a glimpse of what has been happening in the business world. Equity Bank Group has announced a 29% growth in 2014 net profits. During the period, the bank's profits stood at 17.2 billion shillings, driven largely by the bank's regional expansion initiatives and the rise of subsidiaries' contributions to its profitability. And as KTN's Charles Gitonga now reports, the bank is changing the rule book of how banks operate, with plans to go into the health business.
Equity Bank has cemented its position as the most profitable bank in East Africa, posting 29% growth in 2014.
The rise in profits came as interest income rose by 10.9% to 35.3 billion shillings on increased lending that saw the loan book grow by 25% to 214 billion shillings. The lending portfolio was occupied by small and medium enterprises, which took 49% of the total loans issued. Large corporations took 18%, consumers 23%, micro enterprises 7%, and agriculture 3%.
It means the funding, the allocation of credit is biased towards wealth creation.
The performance was further supported by subsidiaries in Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda, which increased the consolidated profit contribution to the group by 346% to 1.07 billion shillings in the year, up from 240 million in 2013.
Tanzania contributed 4.3% of our loan book, followed by Rwanda 2.9%, Uganda and South Sudan, the country in challenges.
Other factors that supported the performance include expansion of customer reach by 12% to 9.6 million accounts, as deposits grew by 26% to 242 billion shillings. The non-performing loans improved by 100 basis points to 4.2%. Going forward, Equity Bank is betting big on its upcoming business line to enable 300 young doctors graduating from its Wings to Fly initiative set up clinics across the country.
Of these 420, we take 300 to the private sector, create a franchise for them called Equity Afya. We fund them, each of them 33 million shillings, to set a clinic in their districts. And then the bank rolls out an Equity Afya medical insurance, which is already rolled out.
Also to be a key source of revenue in the future is its presence in telecommunications through its subsidiary Finserv Limited, which so far subscribed over 600,000 customers on the Equitel network. The entry of Equity Bank into the telecommunications sector is now one of the key focus points for the lender for the next 10 years, as it seeks to grow this service to be the largest mobile services provider in the country. Charles Gitonga, KTN Business.
Well, many thanks there, Charles. By 2050, Kenya could be forced to import more than 75% of the food required to feed its population, according to the Association for Strengthening Agricultural Research in Eastern and Central Africa. Climate change could hurt the country's ability to produce adequate quantities of food, requiring the state to resort to imports. The organization has called for further research into climate change to ascertain the causes, the manifestations and impacts, and propose mitigation responses. Kenya's agricultural sector remains heavily reliant on rain-fed agriculture, and any unpredictability in rainfall patterns has had a huge impact in crop production. The news comes as the government insisted that the country has enough maize to withstand the current dry spell. Well, moving on, the continued cautionary approach taken by local banks of taking part in funding major infrastructure projects could lead to a lull in the takeoff of key public-private partnerships projects in the country. According to the head of the Public-Private Partnership Unit, Engineer Stanley Kamau, local banks are fast becoming key stumbling blocks to avail funding to private developers seeking to venture in PPP projects. Kamau points out that if a rethink by banks is not quickly adopted, this could jeopardize some of the grant projects Kenya is intending to take on.
This was built that was in the 1940s. It's 200 pages. The contract and the contractual framework
There's a bit of a resistance, especially from the banks, but there's a meeting in a couple of days, I think, where the banks will be asked to partner in this. The cost of finance in Kenya is very expensive at the moment, but the banks have to sort of partner with these private entities if they want them to take up these. The private sector, I cannot also say that there is no risk for them to be associated with the government for these projects. But in the long term, 10, 15 years down the line, we have to model it in such a way that they benefit and the government also benefits from it. And I think all the PPP projects which are now currently in the pipeline and going to be driven are sort of projected so that both the government and the public and the private partner do benefit from it.
And well, in conjunction to that, a report that was released just today by Deloitte, African Construction Trends of 2014, it shows that 51 projects were identified compared to 93 projects. This basically means that the country reduced its number of projects that are going out and they are being delivered, which fell to by 55%. Well, let's now take a look at our financial news.
Nakuru-based golfer Richard Anley withstood the early windy conditions at the Royal Golf Club to take the lead at the opening round of the KCB Golf Tour. The tour will act as a build-up to the prestigious Kenny Open Golf Tournament set for next month at the Karen and Country Club. Anley played an impressive round of 5 under par 67 to go and to end the day one, rather, a shot ahead of the pack after day one. Benson Seymour played 4 under 68 to take second position. International Greg Snow and Frank Matillo were joint third on 2 under par 70. Mumias's Dismas Indiza, Hesbon Kutua and Brian Joroge finished a joint 5th on a score of 1 under par 71.
South Africa ndiye alishinda mwaka jana. Sasa mwaka huu ijulikani kama ni Mkenya ndiye atashinda ama Indiza ndiye atashinda. Sasa tunatakuona nitaomba Mungu ndio nipambane nayo sasa.
Wachezaji wetu wa kulipwa wa mchezo wa golf wanajaribu sana kwa ajili Kenya Open inachezwa na wachezaji wale ambao wanalipwa kutoka dunia mzima. Yani wanajaribu sana ambayo wanataka mmoja wetu awahi kushinda hii mchezo wa golf.
Now, Kenya's representatives at the Masculine Africa Club Volleyball Championships, the General Service Unit and Kenya Prisons lost their respective matches on Monday in Tunis, Tunisia. GSU lost 3-2 to Borouge of Algeria, while Kenya Prisons lost 3-1 to Samoa of Egypt. Algerian champions Borouge needed 115 minutes to disarm Kenya's GSU in a match decided by a tiebreaker. The Red Berets won the opening 2 sets 33-31 and 25-21, but the Algerians gained more ground in the other 2 sets, forcing a tiebreaker, with GSU lost 15-1. Ali of Egypt ran over Espoir of Democratic Republic of Congo 3-0. Today was a rest of the day, and GSU will take on Espoir tomorrow, while Prisons squares it out with Ali Benghazi of Libya.
Right, before we leave, some interesting news from Nakuru County.
Now, chaos erupted at the Nakuru County Assembly as rival factions exchanged blows and kicks over the leadership of the Assembly.
Activities were paralyzed for the 3rd consecutive sitting as a faction opposed to County Speaker Susan Kihika protested over proposed amendments to the standing orders, alleging that it was aimed at taming a faction headed by former Majority Leader George Maura Njenga.
Now, the MCAs exchanged blows in a bid to stop proceedings as the Speaker unsuccessfully attempted to restore order in the chaotic chamber.
Deputy Speaker Samuel Tunui and MCA Humphrey Mwaniki were involved in a physical tussle as rival MCAs engaged in a shouting match for close to an hour.
Some of the MCAs sustained injuries during the fracas.
And she also made sure that I want to be removed by making sure that they met with they want to amend the standing orders at Lake Bogoria, and they are using the assembly resources going there to do some amendments so that they can remove them.
I wonder where I've seen that before.
Well, here's a clue. It involved MCA. I don't understand why it's always World Wrestling Federation with the MCAs.
2014 was an interesting year, and I am glad that we have started it like this in 2015 in March.
Just because you want to mock
this is just wonderful.
Well, let's remind you of our big Q this evening. We asked you whether you trust the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. The results are out.
82% of you say no, while only 18% of you have confidence in the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. That is a serious indictment. Let's see whether we can get some few tweets here.
Well, there's an SMS here from Rogers in Mombasa. He says no. After that interview with the chairman, I'm not sure whether he's aware of his responsibilities vis-a-vis that of the CEO. And he says, anaingilia kazi za wengine. Another one here says, this is a very depressing season. First the PAC and now the EACC. If there ever was a feeling of depression, it's now. And this is Eric in Syokimau.
Lavender Andrews here says, no, I don't trust that outfit because nothing is ever done to the culprits. Silas Moja too says, yes, they need more time to reveal the corrupt officials among themselves. And Tom Kidake here says, yes, if we can't trust them, whom will we? There might be challenges, but that's healthy for work.
Last one here from Collins in Nakuru. He says, I don't trust them because I myself took a very straightforward corruption case to them back in 2000, and all I got from them was a booklet of letters promising action, but nothing happened. To me, the anti-corruption institution is not equal to the task. That's Collins in Nakuru. Thank you for your feedback.
Well, thank you very much for your feedback. Thank you very much for watching KTN Prime. Be sure to join us again tomorrow night for the same. My name is Wilson Mburu. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. Good night.
It was great to have you with us this evening. William Silla was our sign language interpreter. And I'm Nancy Kachingira. Good night and see you tomorrow.